would you use a CMA?
Trying to find a price.
Okay, identify price. Would you use it for a buyer or a seller?
Seller. Both, yeah.
Bingo, bingo, bingo. That was a trick question. Yeah, you need them for both. You need to do CMAs, also known as comparable market analysis for both buyers and sellers. Really important, and I'm going to turn it over to Carl, and take it away.
Cool. We have an hour?
Even now.
Very, very, very cool. How many are going to the Cappers lunch today? Let me ask it another way. How many are going to the Cappers lunch next year? Yeah, put those hands up.
Yeah, I'm taking notes.
All right, so the first thing we'll start with, and Barb touched on it, we sometimes forget. I still remember what it was like to be a new agent, even though it was several years ago. We forget sometimes. We throw jargon out that you may have never heard of before, and the first thing is CMA. And it is a comparative market analysis. And what you're doing with the CMA is you're attempting to determine the value of the property. It is not an appraisal. We are not allowed to do appraisals. We are not licensed appraisers. However, we can use the same technique the appraiser uses, the exact same technique, and you should be able to arrive close to a number. Now, we laugh about it in the current market we're in. What's my house worth? Lady, I have no idea. The last one sold $80,000 over asking. What would you like? The buyer might be willing to pay for it, but the appraiser may not be able to justify it. We're only going to do, since this is a short version of what is normally a 2 or 3 hour class, we're just going to talk about the comparative method. There are 2 other methods that are used to evaluate a property. In commercial, many times we will use the income method. When we sell an apartment building, or we sell an office building, or we sell a mobile home park, you're not necessarily buying just the real estate, you're buying the income stream. And rather than looking at comparative properties, what did the last mobile home park sell for, we typically look at what did the last mobile home park sell for as a cap rate based upon its net operating income. It's a different method. The third method, which isn't used often, in my career I've had an appraiser use it twice for a residential property, is the square footage method. And I'll show you a little bit about that. Basically, you determine what the price is per square feet of the comparable properties and make adjustments accordingly. So your phone rings, somebody asks you to come out, they want you to list their property, and we have to determine how much it's worth. What's the first step of that process?
Get their address.
That's a good one. Get their address. You're close to target. It's the most important thing you need to know about this person. If they own it. You laugh. You have somebody call up, I want to sell my property. Awesome, Mr. Jones. And you pull up, Mr. Smith owns it. You've got a question to ask. So always make sure the person you're talking to owns the property or has the right to sell it. In the comparable method, it's very important that we compare apples to apples. And in real estate, can somebody give me an idea what that means? So I call up, I want you to come list my property at 801 Yale Avenue in Swarthmore. And you start doing your work on that, what's the first thing you want to look for?
Township,
Correct.
square footage, school district.
First thing you want to know, okay, it's in Swarthmore, and I chose Swarthmore specifically. Everybody know where Swarthmore is? It's over there by Springfield, cute little college town. The people are a little odd. I can say that. I worked in Swarthmore for 14 years. Swarthmore has the paper, the Swarthmorian. There might have been a joke in the office that was the Swarthmoron. I didn't say that. I didn't say that. Here's an interesting fact about Swarthmore, though. It is indeed a borough in Delaware County. You want to tick off somebody who lives in Swarthmore? Tell them they're from Delco. In Swarthmore, the zip code 19081, in addition to being the borough of Swarthmore, it's a post office. There are sections of Swarthmore that have a 19081 zip code that are in Ridley Township. There's another section that's in Springfield. And in a couple cases, it makes no sense whatsoever because in one aspect, you go down 320, You cross one light, and on this side of the road, it's Ridley Township. On this side of the road, it's Springfield. You go down another block, it's Wallingford. So you have to be careful. When you pull up the public record of the property that you're comparing, first thing you're going to do is check who the owner is. Second thing you're going to check is what's the township or municipality. The township and municipality is the number one criteria an appraiser is going to use. There's very limited times when the appraiser is allowed to look at anything outside of that municipality as a comparison. And typically the only example of that is if solds were incredibly low, and the 2 times I've had this happen were actually on a property in Swarthmore because it's not that big, that the appraiser used another property in the same school district. So you want to watch that as well. School district's another great one. If you pull up the property and it says it's in Ridley Schools but it's a Swarthmore post office, you need to be looking in Ridley for the comparable. In comparing properties, what do you think is important we look at?
Bedrooms and bathrooms.
Bedrooms and bathrooms. That kind of goes to size. What's the other criteria that should come to mind almost as a first step?
Condition.
Condition's important, but I was actually looking for what type of property is it? Is it a single family home? If it's a single family home, you're probably not going to use a twin as a comparable. It's a row home or a townhouse, and you know the difference, right? About $250,000 between them. Old real estate. Is it a townhouse? Is it a row house? Is it a condominium? You know, what's the square footage? Be careful of square footage. It's not my favorite because we don't know how accurate it is, but it can kind of be a litmus test. If you have your laptops out, sign into Bright. You can all give me a wave when you're in Bright.
Bring an apple too.
So if I told you that my property was unit 612 at 801 Yale Avenue in Swarthmore, what would we do? Well, we'd go into Bright, we'd go into search, tease Matt, is he still here? Doesn't work, Matt, it doesn't work. Your screen comes up, we're in Delaware County. That can be my default. I said we were in Swarthmore. Now let's do this first. We're going to go to search, but we're going to go to public records. Same thing, in Delaware County. Swarthmore. And I said it was 801 Yale, unit 612. We hit results. There's the public record. And as long as Sarah Wilhelm is talking to us, I'm the owner. Or maybe Sarah's died and it's her son. A couple things we see in here. This is actually very interesting. Anybody tell me, looking at this record, what we know about Sarah and this property?
She doesn't live there.
She doesn't live there. What's that tell you?
She rents
It's an investment property. It can have a different emotion in selling it. True investor won't have any emotion in selling this. It'll be all about the numbers, which makes your analysis even that more important. We know what the taxes are. More importantly, we look down here on the geographic information. It is in Swarthmore Borough. Wallingford Swarthmore School District. Can also tell you what she paid for it, which doesn't necessarily mean anything, other it might go to her psyche of what she thinks she's going to sell it for. So this is an easy one, which is why we do it for this particular class. What did I take here? Did I search? It's always easy doing a condo because typically they're close to being the same. So we go back to search. We're searching residential. We're going to put in Swarthmore Borough since we confirmed that's where it is. We could say we want everything in 801 Yale Avenue, or you know what? Maybe there's some other condos in town. We want to check those out. I'm going to look for coming soon. I'm going to look for active. I'm going to look for under contract. I'm going to look for pending. I'm going to look for closed. On closed, I'm going to change the time frame to 365. Does anybody know why I look for 365? In an appraiser's world, he comes out to evaluate the property. The appraiser can only look at properties that have settled. And the time window that that property is considered valued is 1 year from the date he's doing the appraisal. So you want to look at the solds over the last year. And this will be especially important if you're looking at a particular property that doesn't have a lot of sales. You can't really go back to a comparable older than that. I have to chuckle. You think that might sound silly. I was having drinks with one of the neighbors last night. He has a property kind of west of the Poconos. He was thinking of selling it, and an agent up there sent him a CMA. And he was flipping out on the CMA. He started looking, he said, the numbers don't seem right. And he looked at the last page where the agent spit out the value, and it said, as of August 13, 2013, your house is worth. And he's like, can you believe this? And I'm like, yeah, sort of.
Oh my gosh.
Clearly it was a mistake on the agent's part, but stick it to 365. Why do we look at coming soon, active under contract, and pending if the appraiser can only look at solds? And this is the difference between a CMA and an appraisal. The reason is for us, yeah, we're going to use the solds to determine what we think it's worth. These will tell us what the market's doing. It seems silly if you're newly licensed that there was a time in real estate when you had competition and you had to be concerned about who was going to sell next. That you had a situation where, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, there's only been 6 condominiums in the Strathaven that sold in the last year, and there's 22 for sale right now. That's a different market than what we're in now, and the game changes if you're the listing agent then. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, what do you think we should do to make sure that in the next 12 months, we're one of the next 6 that sell? Because of the properties that are on the market, 16 of them are not going to sell, ever. So those factors help us determine what's going on with the market. Likewise, if you look at the last 6 sales, and the first sale that might have been 6 months ago was here, and the last sale is here, it's telling you what the market's doing. It tells you how aggressive you can be with the price. All right, one other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here. And as we said, we know in this case, this particular unit is a condominium. And I should say condominium in my terms. Condominium to me is essentially an apartment. Condominium, if you remember from licensure, anything can be a condominium. It's a form of rules and regulations. You could have a single family home that's a condominium. In this case, condominium for this particular building means it's a flat unit or apartment. So we just did ourselves a favor, so to speak. That we just narrowed down, here's everything that's sold in Swarthmore in the last 12 months. We just narrowed it down. So we took a lot of the noise out. We don't have to worry about the singles. We don't need to worry about the twins. got all that done. I'm laughing, I will get used to this. We go up and click results. We got 23 properties to go through. This is kind of really cool being in the business, and you'll get more comfortable with this. This might seem scary. I already know what's happening in the market. Tell me what's happening in the market. What don't we say?
Lots of actives.
There's no actives. There's an active with contract. There's no actives at all. I find this really cool and interesting because I know this building well. There's always 5 or 6 condominiums in this Strathaven for sale. Not in the last 2 years there haven't been. So what we know is we have an active with contract. We have 2 pendants. So 23. So in the last 12 months, 21 condominiums sold. If we were to go back to that public record, when we pulled up the public record sheet, who owned it, where it was, there's some more information on that. If we want to compare apples to apples, what do we know about the 23 properties that are listed here? Are they all the same?
Some are 2 bedrooms, some are 3.
There's some 2 bedrooms, there's some 3 bedrooms, and there's a 1 bedroom. If we went back to our public record, we would see that Unit 612 is a 2 bedroom, 2 bath. So we could actually go back into our search and we could eliminate everything but the 2 bedroom units. Oh, it's kind of funny. I picked 612 at random. Here it is. Forget that it's here. No, but this is interesting from the standpoint, here's 612. Now, usually in class when I normally teach this, I separate you into groups and I make you do this. So we know that we have probably 15 2 bedrooms that are sold that we're going to compare. So are all the 2 bedrooms the same? I'm going to let you cheat on this and tell you they're not. There's a larger 2 bedroom model, which is an N unit, and then all the rest are a standard 2 bedroom. How would you know that if you didn't know this building? Square footage is a great one. What would be 2 other ways you would know? One of the cool things in a condominium building is when they're assessed for taxes, they're typically assessed the same. If it's the same unit, it's going to have the same assessment. It doesn't vary. So we want to look at the taxes. And we can see here in the taxes, they're 4646. Second thing you have in a condominium or a homeowners association is you have a monthly fee. Typically in our area it's monthly. Some areas it's an annual fee. And $712 a month for the fee for this particular 2 bedroom unit 612. Seems high for Delaware County, but does include all your utilities. Most of them do not. In comparison, if I go back to our little search, that's a 3. Here's another 2 bedroom. This one is 801, unit 923. It's a 2 bedroom. What did we talk about? Look at the taxes. It's $52.81. If you look at the condo fee, it's $841. If you were to scroll down and look at the square footage, you'll see it has about 200 square feet more than the other property. That's another way to whittle down those 16 properties that have 2 bedrooms. We only want to look at the ones that have a standard 2 bedroom. So when we now know we're not looking at 1 bedrooms, we're not looking at 3 bedrooms, and we're only going to look at the standard size 2 bedrooms. what would be one of the next important factors in evaluating this property? We can look at an entire year of sales, but which do you think are the most influential sales for the appraiser?
Most recent.
Most recent. If an appraiser comes out to appraise this property and he's got 16 solds in the last 12 months, he's going to look at the most recent 3. And that's also going to tell him what's going on in the market. So as an example, if the market had shifted and prices were going down, you might have a seller argue, but the other property that sold for $10,000 more than I did. Yeah, back in January. But the last 3 sold for this. For that appraiser, January no longer exists. He's going to look at the most 3 recent he can find. One of the things you can do in Bright, if you have a problem with dates and you want to search that, if you go up to the little date column and click on it, it'll sort what you have in your search by the date. And in the case of the sold properties, it'll be the date that it's settled. This one, for demonstration purposes, is perfect. We only have one screen. I can come down here and look, and we've got unit 310 that's a 2-bedroom sold for $130. We've got unit 1221, which is a 2-bedroom, which sold for $150. And we've got unit 307 that sold for $139.50. I'm going to suspect our $150,000 one might be the larger unit. So I'm going to click on it. And we're going to wait for Bright. I'm going to come down and I'm going to look at it. And here now, it's $712 a month, so it's the same size. If you haven't had a chance to visit the property, or you didn't see this when it was on the market, you want to click through the pictures. There's something special about this unit. I can tell you from this particular unit why it's not brand new. That is not the original kitchen. Neutrally painted. This faces the Yale Avenue parking lot. Paint's okay. It's got original bathrooms. Doors have been updated. It's a nice unit, but we kind of see what the demand is for it. This one was $150. Go back to our display. You pull up the other 2 properties and you basically do the same thing. What were they like? And feel free to look at property 4 and property 5. Sometimes what I will do is I will attempt to find what was the lowest price that has sold and what was the highest price. So you kind of have a range. Right, still waiting. Here we go. So let's say it wasn't this easy. Let's say that when we ran this report, there were 3 solds in the Strathaven. There was a 1-bedroom, there was a standard 2-bedroom, and there was a 3-bedroom. The appraiser is going to use those 3 comparables. And in the comparative method, what he's going to do is he's going to adjust the price. Now, there's a rule of thumb to this. It's not an exact science. The exact science is you treat the variable as the same number. First thing he's going to adjust is the bedrooms. Rule of thumb, it's a rule of thumb, it's not etched in stone. They typically value a bedroom about $25,000 to $35,000. So if you adjust for a bedroom, you have a 1-bedroom unit that's sold, and you're comparing it to a 2-bedroom unit. You always adjust the property you're comparing to it. You never adjust from the property you're looking at. So we know if the first property sold that it were a 2-bedroom, well, in theory, it should have sold for $25,000 or $35,000 more because it had a different bedroom. I'm going to add that to the price. We also know, looking at the data, that the one bedroom only has one bath. Bathrooms typically allowed $15,000 to $20,000 of value. I'm going to add another $15,000 or $20,000 to that price. Same on the 3-bedroom. The 3-bedroom has 3 bedrooms, 2 baths. I'm going to take $25,000 or $35,000 off of that for the bedroom. The 3-bedroom, if you were to look into it, has a little additional space. They refer to it as a den. I might make an adjustment for the den. Somebody said, what's the den worth? You sort of make it up. Just be consistent. In this case, if you had 2 3-bedrooms, use the same amount. You could also determine how big the den is and take a calculation based off the amount of square footage. And this is more a rule of thumb. If you do this right, it should come out close in the end when you're using those 3 properties. And it usually does. The biggest gray area when you do this, and it gets kind of hard if you don't have a lot of comparables to go by, is condition. Condition plays a huge factor. Now, this is the only time that you as an agent can go back and look at something that's more than a year old. You might need to go back into the previous year and find a 2-bedroom that was original that sold and one that was completely updated and sold. And what was the ratio? What was the difference between those two? If you have a ballpark idea what the ratio was, and the ratio is, was it 20% more? Was it 15% more? Was it 30% more? If you're evaluating a property that's been completely gutted and it's absolutely perfect, but you don't have a comparable to it, but you could look back a year ago and say, you know what, in this market, it was a 30% difference. You can add 30% to the property that wasn't upgraded to bring you up to what the property you're selling is. Now, usually when I teach this class, I'm making you do this and we're coming back to look at it. A couple other things we notice on our list. Remember when we searched, I could have put in, I just want to see 801 Yale Avenue. It's a big building, there's 280 units. That's going to be my comparable. I did condominiums instead. We have a condominium 100 Rutgers popped up. That one sold for $262,000. In this particular case, since we have condominiums and enough condominiums in Yale Avenue, we would completely disregard 100 Rutgers Avenue. Why it's a condominium, it's significantly different than what the Strathaven is, which is 801 Yale Avenue. If we didn't have all these, you might need to consider it. And if you had to consider it, you would do it the same way that we just did the analysis on. You would do bedrooms. You would also do square footage, and you'll find this one at 100 Rutgers Avenue is really almost a townhouse as opposed to a condominium. And you'll find it's also a little bit larger. So you have all these data points. What else do you think would be important to know in your market analysis about the properties that sold? How about how long they took to sell? Do you think a seller would want to know that? Mr. and Mrs. Seller, it's going to take 32 days for your property to sell. Anybody in here a statistical nerd? Going back when the market shifted in 2008, I had a listing in Swafford. 2008, it was literally, the market was like it is right now. And it was that way on Monday. When we walked in Tuesday morning, it's like somebody came into the office and turned the real estate switch off. It stopped. Cold, just stopped. Inventory started to build and build and build and build. And properties that were sold in a day with multiple offers, it just didn't happen anything. Everything stopped. And I had this particular property. We came up with a value for it. We put the value on, and we were on the market for a month, hadn't sold. In 30 days on the market, it's kind of a point, you're the listing agent, you need a price reduction. So go ahead and hitting the seller up for a price reduction. He said, I'm not reducing it. I said, you're not going to sell. He said, prove it. He's an engineer. Okay? Pulled all this data back up, and in a spreadsheet, I made a spreadsheet up of, here's all the properties in the last year that sold within 15 days. Here's all the ones that sold between 15 and 45 days. Here's all the ones that sold between 45 and 60, and here's the ones that sold after that. And then from that, I also did an analysis of, this is what the property was listed at, this is what it sold for, this is the ratio of sold price to list price on these properties. And then I did how many days they were on the market. And that was like the sun shining and somebody going, woo! Turned out, in Swarthmore, at that time, you listed your house, there was a 98% chance your house was going to go under contract within 17 days of coming on the market or the last price adjustment. And if you were on the market longer than 17 days, there was only a 2% chance you were going to sell it all in the next 12 months. Guess what my engineer did? Good God, I'm going to be here for a year. Drop the price 20%. You're under contract 5 days after that. This can have big impact on your business. Also makes you look like you know what you're doing. Well, most of you volunteered, you're not a statistical nerd, and you don't want to be doing spreadsheets and crunching numbers. How the hell am I going to get this information? Show you a little cheat. Keller Williams, we have a model that we lead with revenue, not expenses, which means we don't want you to spend any money until you've made money. There's several different softwares out there to do CMAs. Toolkit CMA is one that I use. I want to say it's $14 a month, $20 a month. I'm not telling you to buy it. You don't buy anything until you've made some money. Toolkit CMA is set up. The CMA packet that is in KW Command is also in Toolkit CMA. So you have the same exact material for free. You don't need to buy Toolkit CMA. Cool thing about Toolkit CMA is I can select the properties I'm using for this analysis, export the data from Bright, put it into CMA, and it spits everything out. Oh my God, that'd be so easier. Well, we already have the stuff, the rest of the stuff in Command. How can I add this in? Bright has taken care of that for you for free. So as an example, we're going to go in here, and I'm going to pick just randomly 310, 307, 810, 912. Those are the properties I'm going to use for my analysis. Down here on the orange bar, see the little guy that says CMA? Click on that. So they're going to ask you for the contact's name, create a new contact. You're going to put the seller's name in. I'm going to put Ken in because he's in my contact data. It'd be funny if he gets an email later today. Yes, I know. How many of you had open houses this weekend? How many of you had buyers out this weekend? Cool. How many sent out, I don't know, 50 letters? Maybe 20 phone calls? Be secret agents, guys.
I did not pay him to ask all those questions, but it's our money.
You cannot make any money in this business if people don't know who you are and what you do. All right, I put my contact in, I go to pages. In pages, I'm gonna give it, let's see. I've got a cover sheet, subject is adjustments, comparables, additional fields, map in. Okay, and I've got all this data about the properties. I go to subject.
Would you go up to that?
To subject, up at the top. The top part running across. Gives me a page to put in the information on the subject property. Let me see if it'll let me finish it without doing it. Comparables. It also gives me a spot where I can make adjustments. So if I were adjusting for bedrooms or anything else, I can take care of that. Pricing, it'll give me a spot that I can fill in pricing data. It has it defaulted, but I can suggest a price. Let's see if it lets me finish. It does. If I view the CMA, here's the screen that would show me if I made any price adjustments. The data from all the properties are already in there, including their photographs. I have a summary of the comparables. Mr. and Mrs. Seller. These are the most three recent sales of 2 bedrooms in the Strathaven. We have Unit 810, Unit 307, Unit 310. In this column, we have their list price. We have a list price range of $139,500 to $149,900. And we have a sold price range from $130,000 to $155,000. The median of the comparable listings is $139,500. The average of the comparable listings is $141,500. Back to the statistical nerd. Everyone know what the median is. And it's okay if you don't. The median, if you have 10 properties for sale, it is the property exactly in the middle. The average is the sum of all those properties divided by the number of properties. Do be careful with that when the market shifts and we don't have many solds. This is where Zillow is fun with their estimates. When Zillow first started, it was a year where there weren't many sales in Swarthmore, and there was a mansion in Swarthmore Hills that sold for $1.5 million, and there's a 1-bedroom in the Strathaven that sold for $95,000. And if you had a property in Swarthmore, Zillow would tell me the estimate of your property was the average of those 2 properties. So if you had a 1-bedroom in Strathaven after that sale, suddenly you were worth $650,000 was your estimate. We laugh at that. Imagine going out on that listing appointment. It's worth $600. I need to sell it today. No, it's not. But Zillow said, yeah, I know. Scary thing then is we would say, well, tell Zillow to buy it. Yeah, they do. As you go down further, we're talking about some things that you need to know. There's some common graphs, and these are in the Bright booklet. They will also be in your KW Command booklet. The bigger charts you look at, keep in mind some people are visual. Where we talked about that price range, if you're dealing with a seller that's a visual learner, those words mean nothing to them. This chart, they get. What do we know by the chart? And I could put 3 more properties up there. Well, we kind of know in the market right now, things are selling for pretty much their asking price. We've got one that sold slightly below and one that sold slightly above. Same way you go down further on the charts. Another chart I'm graphing, there's another chart in there that talks about days on the market. And in this case, 2 of the properties sold in 9 days and 1 sold in 17. You're dealing with an engineer, it's a little more complicated, but you could tell him what's the statistical likelihood that your property is going to sell for the price I'm estimating it at, and at what point there isn't a chance in hell it's going to sell for what you listed it for. That's really important to a seller if you can prove to them. I know Uncle Fred, who was in real estate 57 years ago, when they wore gold jackets, told you that I'm going to come in and underprice your house to sell it in a day, and that you think it should be listed at $250,000. But here's the data that says it should be $150,000. By the way, I did a statistical analysis on this. Here's the breakdown of what your property is going to sell for as a ratio of its sold price and its timeline. Notice that nothing's sold $100,000 over the median price, Mr. Seller. Nothing. This isn't fiction. This is the data, and this is the law of supply and demand. It's like the law of gravity. It's not the idea of supply and demand, it's a law. We can't ignore the law of gravity. Stuff drops. Supply and demand is the same way. If we have too much supply, there's not enough demand. And if we're overpriced and there is supply, you're just going to sell your neighbor's property first. Mrs. Seller, do you want your property to sell first, or would you rather be last and be here a year from now? Well, no, I want to be out of here in 30 days. Shouldn't it make sense to put a 30-day price on it? So questions about doing a CMA? I'm going to give you a homework assignment.
How do you do this on investment property, especially as is?
On investment property, what we look at, and it depends on the type of investment property. So as an example, I have 2 properties in Chester. I have a twin and I have a duplex. The twin, and this sounds funny if you know anything about Chester real estate, the twin right now has a better value doing a traditional residential comparative analysis. Typically what we do in investment properties that is considered commercial real estate, and what we do is we find what is the cap rate. And the cap rate is a ratio between the net operating income and the value of the property. It's sort of a 3-legged stool. You have the cap rate, you have the net operating income, and you have the value of the property. If you have 2 of those, you can figure out the rest. The cap rate, if you're in the commercial real estate, is typically known to you or is relatively easy to find out. So as an example, you could look at previous sales, knowing what the typical income was for that property, and determine what the cap rate is. I was going to say 2 years ago, the cap rate in Chester was probably 11 or 12%. It's probably down closer to 8 or 7 right now. When we sell mobile home parks, $6-7 million mobile home parks, we're not even looking at other mobile home parks other than to see what their cap rates were. What we're looking at is, Mr. Seller, I need your financials. Ideally, I need them for 3 years. I need to see everything. I need to see your income. I need to see your tax returns. I need to see what expenses you're claiming. Once we determine what his net operating income is, if we're in a mobile home park in Pennsylvania that has public utilities, meaning it has public sewer and public water, right now that product, depending how close it is to an urban area, is trading between a 4 and 5 cap rate, which is absurd. It's a really low rate. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, before you go on about cap rate, can you explain it a little bit more to me?
Sure.
I'm sorry.
Sure that's not right?
No, it's a nice spot. I know how to get it off. Just like I could get a stain off. Cap rate is equal to the ratio of net income and value. So the cap rate you don't make it up. You look at other properties similar, so it will typically be set. So as an example, In this example, I said the cap rate for a mobile home park in Pennsylvania that had public water, public utilities near an urban center would be 4%. So I get all the financials from the seller, and we find out that his net operating income on this park is $525,000. Now that's how much money he makes at the end of the day after all the expenses are taken out. So if I were to take my calculator out, and I were to take $525,000 and divide it by 4%, so basically, doing a little algebra, don't get scared. We're going to take 4%, we convert that to a decimal, it's 0.04. We divide that into 525,000, and that tells me this park is worth $13,125,000. Here's the thing that's cool with commercial real estate. If I can document that on paper and sell this park for $13,125,000, the bank's appraiser is going to come out and say, give me your financials. Here you go. And if he can document my financials, which I'm going to make sure he can, he's going to say, yeah, this is worth $13,125,000.
So you want that percentage to be lower, is better.
It depends who you are. If you're the buyer, if you're the seller, yeah, you want this as low as possible. You can't, cap rate is something we have no control over. It's strictly market driven. The other thing that will affect cap rate on a sale is the condition of the product. So as an example, the apartment complex they built in Media 2 years ago down at the end of Baltimore Pike. I forget how many apartments in there. Say there's 200 apartments in there. They're brand new. Everything's brand new. That's going to sell for a 3 or 4% cap rate compared to if it was one of Media Real Estate's apartments that's 30 years old that has 30-year-old kitchens, 30-year-old baths, 30-year-old electric. That's probably going to sell at a higher cap rate. And you have investors that look for, as an example, let's say that other property sold at a 10 cap. You have investors that are seeking that property out because they consider that value added. They're buying it below market value even though they have to put some money into it. And as ridiculous as it sounds, even on $13 million transactions, people flip properties. So that's the second method. The part that gets interesting is determining the net operating income. Because when you go into these and you get the owner's financials, people that own businesses, you all own a business in real estate, we have a tendency to maximize our deductible expenses the best way we possibly can. And why do we do that? Well, it lowers our income tax. Also lowers your income, so be careful if you're qualifying for a mortgage. What we have to do on large investment properties, as an example, is we have to go through their financials. And if they're writing off their personal car, it's a true expense. It doesn't involve the value of the park. That comes out of the income statement. They're writing off their personal health insurance, not just their employees. Their personal health insurance comes out. It gets a little more complicated than that. If the business is running as a C Corp and they're being paid as an employee of that C Corp, it has to stay in. But typically those things come out. If there's a cable bill that they're running for the office and the office happens to be their house, that's coming out. And everything we pull out of it actually raises this number, which ultimately raises the value of the park. The negotiations we have in commercial real estate typically go along the line between the buyer and seller. Well, you don't have an expense in there for that. You took it out. That's right. I want it back in. You know, we're arguing and negotiating over this because it's going to determine what they're paying for it. You will rarely ever use this in residential real estate. Now, in investment properties, both of my properties in Chester, I can use this method, but when I use this method, the income on the properties isn't currently matching what the best use of the property is. So as an example, my one property that's a twin, The best use of that property in real estate from a value standpoint is as a personal house right now. And as a personal house, it's currently worth about $150,000. If I do this method, it's going to tell me it's worth $122,000. I'd rather have the 150. And the market will bear that 150. The duplex, kind of the same thing. The thing you do though with an investment property, and when I say a smaller investment property, one like that that's typically residential, is do both methods and see if they match. If they match, you're golden. If they don't match, you want to ask the question, well, why aren't they matching? And it might be that the best use of the property is this use. And using the comparative method, the value is this. Everything else, though, when you get into the larger commercial stuff, office buildings, apartment complexes, mobile home parks, retail, they all work off of the income method as opposed to the comparable method. You still double check the comparable method, but as an example, a couple other things change in commercial evaluations. If I'm evaluating a mobile home park in Pennsylvania, even though the park's in Erie, I'm looking at Pennsylvania. The allowable comparative area is much larger. And what I'm looking at, what were the cap rates of the last 5 properties that sold? What were the properties like? What was their condition? What were their rents? Did they have public utilities or not? And that in the larger investment properties, that's probably the biggest factor. If you have a septic system on a 150-unit mobile home park, you're not selling the same cap rate that somebody that doesn't have that is. You can also find, again, going back to the income, you can find a mobile home park of the same exact quality in Indiana, Pennsylvania, compared to a mobile home park in Erie, Pennsylvania. They might be the exact same park, the exact same number of units, except this one gets a monthly lot rent of $450, this one gets a monthly lot rent of $225. They're not comparable, as we would call the comparative method. You're looking at the income. The only 2 cases you will find in residential real estate where this will get odd is when you don't have enough comparables to determine value. At that point, you might see the appraiser switch and use the square footage method. And you might see him, and again, using Swarthmore as an example, there may be a year where, this has to go back 20 years ago, I sold a twin in Swarthmore, and in that particular year, there was only one other twin that sold in Swarthmore. And he pulled a twin in from Wallingford to use as a comparable because it was the same school district. That was also an interesting appraisal because he combined 2 methods in that appraisal. He went outside of the municipality, staying in the same school district, but he also used square footage to determine the price. And he was a great appraiser because without that, we would have never appraised. All right, so your homework assignment. You thought I was kidding. Wherever you live, whether you own it or whether you rent it, you have till Friday to send me a CMA. My email is my name. carladams@kw.com. I'll give you some notes what I think about your CMA. And for extra credit, you're going to document that you did 50 calls this week. Can't be secret agents, people.
Where's this credit going to?
I don't know. I gotta figure out as I'm saying that. Well, what's the extra credit going to be? What's your gift if you complete the assignment?
How about, maybe a new client, maybe, a $500,000 listing, $500,000 buyer. Think of the commission on that. I think that's a pretty cool.
I was going to say I'm rusty. I usually have much better stories that I can relate to doing something. I'll give you a tip. The most valuable tip in securing a listing. You've gone on a listing appointment, you've done the CMA, you've gone out, you made the presentation, there's 4 other agents coming in for the presentation. What will get you that presentation? What will get you the listing? There's one thing, I guarantee you there's a 90% chance if you do it, Nobody else of the other 4 are doing it, and you're gonna get the listing because of it.
Bring beer.
That helps. If you do it before the presentation. If you're smart, you might even do this going to the appointment. Hand write them a thank you note. Stick it in the mailbox as soon as the presentation's over. I can't tell you how many listings I've gotten when I was up against competition, and the only difference was day after I was there, and if it's in Collegeville as an example, drive up to Collegeville and stick it in a Collegeville mailbox and they're going to get it the next day. Always ask the question, so what was it that made you choose me? And I've heard this so many times. You showed up on time, you were dressed professionally, and you sent me a thank you note. I can't tell you the last time somebody wrote me a note. The other people didn't even call and say thank you or check on me. Think about that. None of this mattered, and my statistics were perfect. So thank you. Any questions, guys?
I'd like to hear some ahas as well, because that was a power-packed hour.
I just have a real quick question about the bathrooms. You said that they add like 15,000 to 20,000. How much for half that?
10. The numbers, the appraisal method sounds ridiculous. You can't get a bathroom done for $10,000, but that's typically what they value at it.
Okay.
I wouldn't overly play with it. When you're making those price adjustments, the only thing that's important, be consistent. Condition and a bathroom aren't the same thing. That's two separate adjustments. The first adjustment, is there a bathroom or is there not? And that's one number. You might certainly find where you have, in the case of the Strathaven condominium, you have somebody that still has the original bathroom from 1972 and somebody that gutted the bathroom. That's going to be a difference in condition. It's going to show in the price. And that is the biggest gray area in doing a CMA, because the appraiser makes that number up as well. So how does the appraiser put a number on condition? They make it up. And you're kind of going to do the same thing. And again, I can think of a 2-bedroom condo that sold about a year and a half ago in here. Oh my God, the kitchen was just phenomenal. I bet it was a $50,000 kitchen. Didn't add $50,000 to the price. You know, there was a limit of what that kitchen added to it, and ultimately the seller did it because they liked that kitchen. Did it affect the sale of the property? Oh, absolutely. Somebody bought that because of the kitchen. They just didn't compensate them for the $50,000 they spent. Was there a $15,000 difference because of that kitchen compared to a property that didn't have it? Maybe. Ideally, you want to try to document that.
So when you're searching properties, what should we be using? Total bathrooms or full bathrooms?
My initial search, I wouldn't specify a bathroom because your best comparable might be one that doesn't exactly match the house. And this is more true when you're outside of the condominium, when you're searching for a single family home. Most areas in Delaware County were built, a quarter of them were built prior to 1930. Majority of them were built post-World War II. And for the most part, Swarthmore is a great example. None of the houses are the same, with the exception of there's 2 blocks that were developed in like 1949 that were the same builder, essentially the same house. So I wouldn't necessarily start my search with bathrooms and bedrooms. I would look for, I'm in Springfield, I want to look singles. One of the other things that I do when I do the search, you put your search criteria in, I'm comping a Springfield single family home, I put the criteria in, let me have coming soon, active with contract, pended, sold, and sold in the last year. And I click search and 300 properties come up. Click the map button and then pull it up to where your property is and try to stay within 3 properties within that. The perfect CMA, in my opinion, and this tells you when the market is, we'll call it stable. You have 3 listings, you have 3 pendants, you have 3 solds, you have a couple of, you might not be familiar with this term, expireds. That's the perfect CMA. You have what the market's doing, what it's worth, where it's going. In the market we're in, you don't get that. You're going to get what we saw here. But I would start with that of, oh, and when I look at the 3 or 4 blocks that are around that property, and in some areas, as an example, in Havertown's like Philadelphia, there's neighborhoods. I live in Penfield. Across the street from me, a block away, is Chatham Village. If I go a block in this direction, I'm in Chatham Park. And if I go across the street this way, I'm in Brookline. When I'm comping that area, I'm doing exactly what I said. In the first place I'm going to look is in that specific neighborhood. That's where my comparable's likely to be. And in this market, yeah, I'm going to find solds in those comparables. But there may be a chance where you have to use one in Penfield to comp for Chatham Village if there's not enough. But I would start with there, and then when you find the 3 or 4 closest houses to it, that's where you start looking at, okay, this one's a 4-bedroom, this one's a 3, this one's a 5, this one has a family room, this one doesn't, this one the basement's finished. Those are all adjustments you'll make. How do you know what the adjustment is? You'll get used to it the more time you spend in the business, or you knock on somebody's door and say, I've got 3 comparables, one's a 5-bedroom, one's a 3-bedroom, this one has 2 baths, this one has 3, this one has 1. What's the number?
I think I did that to you a few years ago.
Probably.
Help.
Probably, and that's, you know, that's normal. And the further you get away from your specific area, the harder sometimes it is to do that. Sometimes it's cool when you get out of here, and Glen Mills comes to mind, Collegeville area comes to mind. You're in a Toll Brothers development. That's a CMA blessing. Anybody can do a CMA in there. They're all the same. You know, you might find very small differences between, well, this one's stucco and nobody wants to buy stucco, and this one's got a stone front and it's got vinyl siding. But other than that, they're identical.
Let me hear a couple of ahas. I'll call it.
First of all, can't write by Sharon.
Can't break? Okay, thank you.
Oh, yeah, same here, thank you.
I just feel better about how you taught us how to break it down to have a lot less properties to look at.
Correct.
Because I would be going crazy looking at so
Oh,
many, and
absolutely.
I think you really helped me to
Glad to hear it.
really break it down further.
This is something, CMAs, when you're doing your first few CMAs, oh my God, you're going to spend a day on it. Shouldn't take you more than 10 or 15 minutes to do a CMA. So it's a rare property. It's a rare property that's going to take you longer than that. One of the things to do, and right now because of the pandemic, you don't have, is if your sphere of influence is in a specific area, as an example, going back to when I did more residential, my area was the Wallingford-Swarthmore School District. I worked at D. Patrick Welsh for 14 years. I worked in Mayberry. One of the things that Pat Welsh, who started the firm, insisted, and when I was originally licensed in 1894, when I was originally licensed in 94, I worked for Weichert, and they talked about doing this, but not everybody did. At D. Patrick Welsh, when Pat Welsh owned it, there are only 7 of us, and it was required that every Tuesday, and we'd have an office meeting every Tuesday morning at 9, last maybe about an hour. Every Tuesday, though, if you didn't have a new listing and you were hosting a broker's open, you were in the minivan with everybody else going out to the broker's opens. And one of Pat's insistences were that you knew the market well enough that if a floor call came into the office on one of our properties and the person seemed disinterested, that you would rattle off every other property in the school district that was for sale and be able to walk that person over the phone through that property and describe it to a T. And if you couldn't do that, you weren't working there. So when we get back to the point of there are brokers opens, if you're not hosting one on Tuesday, you need to be going out and looking at them. Because not only can you do that when you meet a buyer, and the buyer is gonna think you're God because you're recommending they look at another company's listing, and of course, you're going to take them and sign a buyer agency contract with them. But the other part of that is when somebody calls you to do a CMA, you already know the market. And you can speak when you're presenting the CMA, oh, I was in this property, and it had this, and that. And you don't have those things, or you know what? You have X, Y, and Z, and this property didn't have that, and it sold for this, so you're gonna sell for this. It just comes out like this.
And shy of brokers opens, you guys can schedule preview appointments, which you should be doing.
You can, and you should also, in this market, with people that are marketing a listing properly where maybe it's not coming on the market to a Sunday open, if you don't have appointments that Sunday, you need to be at that open house looking at the property, whether you're the buyer for it or not. Oh, I don't want to do that. Okay, go work for Amazon. This is not a job, it's a business. And I say it like we're teasing you. Can't be a secret agent.
Mm-hmm. They've heard me say that many times. Can you give me one more aha from this side of the room?
I like the presentation you put together
Yeah.
from Bright.
Here's the cool thing about, and this goes to the Keller Williams theology of red light, green light. Told you, I use Toolkit CMA. It cost me a couple $100s a year. I don't care, it cost me a couple $100s a year. I've got money coming in. You're a new agent, you don't have money coming in, don't spend it, and here's why. If you use what we just did in Bright, and you combine that with your KW Command listing presentation, you have the exact same listing presentation that I have in Toolkit CMA for free. You've got, I want to be able to do that in 15 minutes. You can spend an hour on that and you're fine. And that's important to go in with. Oh my God, I'm a brand new agent. How am I going to go up against marine? Go in with the presentation. How do you beat somebody like that? Well, they're incredibly busy. They know the market. I know the market. I've been doing this for 40 years. I can wing this and come in. Guess what? That person doesn't know that top agent other than they called them because, well, they're a top agent. And they come in and wing it, and you come in and hand them a presentation, and you do a great job on your presentation. Who can answer this question for me? You're at a listing presentation. Becca, you're a brand new agent. Why should I hire you over Marine?
I have lots of time.
Mrs. Seller, that's a wonderful question. Maureen Inglesby is one of my favorite top agents. And as a top agent, she sells tons of properties and she's so busy and diligent and dutiful. She might not have time to service the listing like I could. I'm going to be on this every day. I'm going to talk to you every 48 hours. I'm going to provide you feedback. And you've noticed the presentation I've done, and their head gone, yeah, she's already been in here and came in here and winged it. That's how you beat a top agent. Top agents sometimes come with a shovel. I speak from experience of being the top agent. And the times I've had my ass handed to me, I came in with a shovel, I wasn't prepared, and somebody else came in and was prepared. And sometimes that's a new and experienced agent.
Any final questions, comments, ahas?
Can I ask again who's going to be at the Cappers Luncheon next year?
See if you are, okay? Okay.
And there's no video camera at the Cappers.
You could say all the things.
Well, thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Now you know why I
I'll
asked
be
Carl
looking for your homework on Friday.